welcome back.
Welcome back.
Welcome back to the Layman's Terms Show. Here we are, second week of talking about sometimes it takes a woman to win it. We're talking about Rahab. Keith, give us a little biblical, contextual, scriptural update on Rahab.
Yep, so we're going to read from Joshua 2, verses 2 through 5. The king of Jericho was told, "Look, some of the Israelites have come here to spy out the land." So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab, "Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land." But the woman had taken the two men and hid them. She said, "Yes, the men came to me, and I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, they left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly. You may catch up with them."
Ooh.
So we've got Rahab. We got a couple Israelites that come to spy out Jericho. This is right after, they finally made it to the promised land. And they've got the Israelites have to fight for the land that will become theirs. So they happen upon Jericho, and they're like, "Send two guys to spy it out." And instead of these
espionage,
instead of these guys getting murdered by the king of Jericho, Rahab swoops in because of,
who knows?
well, she says, the Lord that they worship is a mighty and powerful God, and she's looking to help them, in part because she's afraid of what's going to happen, but she has to be afraid of helping them either way, right? Because the king of Jericho is looking for these guys, and she's lying to him.
Yeah.
And if he finds out, she's a goner, right? So this is kind of like a hot take here a little bit with Rahab. She kind of flips the script a little bit. She's not one of those people that is a polite member of society, right?
Yeah, kind of, the maybe opposite. We talked last episode, we talked about Deborah,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Very opposite of Deborah.
Yeah. Sorted history, occupation,
Lowliest of occupations that you could possibly have.
and not a whole lot of positives or positive influence or opportunities to positively influence or impact the wider world around here, around her, and but also has an opportunity to respond to a call of the Lord, to make a decision to either help or not help the cause of the Israelites.
Yeah, so that's a really good point that you make, and I want to expand on that a little further. So Rahab was considered a very much unlikely hero, one, because of her gender, right? Women at this time were...
not equals.
No, I mean, not even not equals, like the lowest of lows that you could possibly get, right? Their witness couldn't even be used in court. They couldn't go to court and testify against somebody because they didn't believe them. So obviously her gender, her occupation, her nationality, she's not an Israelite, right? So the Israelites don't trust her,
Mm-hmm.
right? So how does this story, as compared to your point, Deborah and the judges that we did last episode, how does this really challenge our assumptions around who God uses for what purpose?
Oh yeah. Well, I think it definitely challenges that. I think it's a reminder that, kind of like we've talked with salvation, is God can choose to offer salvation to whomsoever God so chooses to offer salvation to at whatever point in time God so chooses to offer that salvation to whomsoever God chooses
Yep.
to offer that salvation to, right?
Yep, for sure.
I think like that, this is a really, really, really good reminder that God makes the rules,
Yeah.
not us,
Mm.
and God makes the decisions, and not us. And our job is to recognize that and play our role that we've been called to play in that, not to be one of my favorite phrases, biblically indignant about the whole thing.
Yeah.
But what?
But how dare you?
God, no, you mustn't.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Interesting take. Small human.
Yeah, what I find interesting about it is that all throughout the Bible, there's these points of inflection where God uses unlikely people to advance His kingdom on earth, right? And uh, in all stages of life too, right? Young,
Yeah.
middle, old, right? It doesn't matter. And I think for me, that also reinforces and challenges my assumptions sometimes of when I improperly look at someone and say like maybe they're too far gone. They've done too much bad in their life, right? They're a evil person, right? They're too far gone to live into God's purpose, and I get a little judgy sometimes.
Do you know?
I do. Internally, I try not to externalize that, but I do get a little judgy, and but I also think flip side of it, I get a little judgy about myself too.
Yeah.
And I constantly
You have a high standard.
I have a high standard for
You
myself.
try to make it universal,
right.
not hypocritical.
Yeah, and I know what God wants from me, and every single time that I don't live up to it and I do something else that I think that I want to do instead of what God wants to do, I'm hard on myself, right? And I think that we had kind of a hot take in this episode, in this conversation with Rahab, which is that I really believe. Here's where I think the world is wrong. Okay, the world, people that are outside the church that aren't highly involved in the church, sometimes look at people in the church as being prideful, right?
Yeah.
And there are those prideful people. Like, don't get it twisted. But when you're inside and you look, I think there are more people that struggle with doubt than pride. Just like myself, doubting constantly myself or other people, right? And that's not from a prideful stance. I'm not saying this person is worse than me. I'm like, no, this person's equally as bad as I am. You know what I mean? Like equally as bad as I am. And so I think that a lot of people struggle with that doubt that they aren't good enough, that they're not living into God's purpose, and they're, or maybe they don't know what God's purpose is, or they don't know what their God-given gifts are. And all that is more of a doubt piece than a pride piece. What do you think?
I think, I think the sin of pride is so hard to define. I think that's a complex one, right? You'll pick anything that your kids have ever done that they've developed because they've put in some effort to improve something, and then it's worked, right?
Sure.
I'm so proud of them, right?
Yeah.
And well, that's not sinful, is it? right? And then to encourage them, say, man, you should be really proud of your achievements, your accomplishments. You worked hard. You overcame your doubts that you had, and proved to yourself that through hard work and perseverance, you can be more than you originally thought. Right? You should be proud of that.
Yeah.
Does that fall in the biblical sinful definition of pride?
No, I don't think
know.
so.
I don't think so. I think it
so.
falls outside of that. So I think this is a hard, anyway, just completely derailing our podcast, but I do think this is a topic worth.
I don't think it's a derailment. I think it's important.
It's a topic worth discussing because, scripture that's been oft-quoted scripture is God opposes the proud, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, my Grammy's very proud of all her grandchildren, and I don't feel that she's ever,
You struggled because you couldn't talk about your Grammy last episode,
I know.
so now you're doing it.
But
and do not mention Gideon.
I do not feel like he's in opposition to God, right? Or God is in opposition to her. So I think
here's what sorry to interrupt, but I think that
interrupt my derailment.
Yes. I think that when pride becomes sinful is when you start doing comparative pride.
Well, then you're just getting into comparison.
No, yeah, you and I have talked about this a lot on this podcast, which is comparison I would almost say is the root of almost all evil.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. And when you're proud of your kid because they tried out for the basketball team and they made it, and even though they play about 30 seconds a game, you're just super proud that they put the time and the effort into making the baseball team or the basketball team or the tennis team or the football team or whatever, right? What becomes the sinful pride is when you start yelling at the coach because your kid's better than that kid, and why is that kid playing more time than your kid, right? That's the sinful pride of it. And sorry, this is like 2 episodes in a row where we've used sports analogies.
I don't have much left.
I know. I think about, so we just had the draft. Sorry for another sports analogy. All those people that hate sports analogies. I
hate people listening to people talk about the draft.
I know. Oh, let's talk about something different. Let's talk about getting picked for kickball. We could talk about getting picked for kickball.
How about getting picked up from the car rider line? I used to be, my goal used to be the second to last car there. So I didn't have to set in the line.
Oh my God, that's terrible.
So I could cruise through, right? Yeah. And it's efficient, Keith.
Yes.
It's efficient.
I guess.
Setting in the line is inefficient, but if you can show up at the point that you never had to stop, you just kind of perpetually rolled and you got up there and you picked the kids up, which is, but if it's an inefficient if you're the last one there and you're really late. So then
I don't think this is a great comparison.
I don't think it is either.
So
but I thought it was a good story to tell
Let's
because the kids would be like, Dad, can't you come get us sooner? And I'd be like, well, look, at least you're not that kid.
Yeah. This is terrible. This is a terrible example. I think it's this. I think that when you do a job, I do a job, we do work, right? And when we do something and we're proud of it, and we're like, wow, look at what we did, right?
Oh,
when you throw a
that's
kids
prideful.
event,
Look at what I did.
Look at what we did. Look at what we did is what I said, not I did.
Yeah, you
look
did.
at what we did. This was a great time. This was great. This was great, right? And then somebody comes to you and says, hey, Mitch, you know what could have made this better, right? And if you're like, in your brain, if you're like, ooh, yeah, that's a good point, or yeah, maybe we'll do that next time. You've got a little pride from having the event, but you're not sinfully prideful. Now,
No,
if you're
humble enough to accept
some criticism.
Yeah,
right.
Or
some feedback.
Yeah, and then you have the ability to choose to use it or not use it.
But if you look at them and go, you didn't try to do this event, you don't know what you're talking about. This was the best event ever. That's when it's prideful, right?
So arrogance. Maybe we
A little
can
level of arrogance.
maybe we can maybe we can add prideful arrogance. God opposes prideful arrogance.
Yeah.
God opposes you thinking you got here out of your own abilities, not your God-given abilities. God opposes you being, sports analogy, being born on third base and thinking you hit a triple. That's what God opposes.
Sports.
God does not oppose a shot into the gap and you stretching a double into a triple with a good slide.
Yeah. And I think that during this, bringing it back to Rahab for a second, this choice of hers to hide these spies, instead of just giving them, the easiest thing to do was just give them up. Here you go, king. There they are. That's the easiest thing for her to do. But she had to have some kind of inflection point too in making that decision of analyzing her unworthiness, inability to maybe like, dude, can I do this? There's this point which she had to rely on some faith that it would work out, right? So in this moment, she's got faith in these two Israelites and their God. It's not her God at this point, that this is going to work out for her in the short term and hopefully long term, right? And I think that this story in a way draws some parallels to Rahab and Jesus's willingness to hang out with
For sure.
and save people that in their society in Jesus's time were sinners. And the Jewish religion at the time and people looked down on sinners as unclean, not worthy people. And this story of Rahab is just this really great parallel between the two. And I'm curious, and what's kind of sparked my thought process after thinking about this is, what is my personal willingness to hang out with and be with people that are considered the sinners of our time, the unworthy people that people would look at and say, why are you hanging out with them? Not from like a really weird cultural position, but from like just a, oof, why are you hanging out with that person? What do you think about that? Have you thought about this kind of parallel?
Yeah,
I mean, you hang out with me, so obviously.
that's true. How do they say that? It's a pin in your something.
Feather in your cap?
Yeah. Something like that. Some very prideful, external, noticeable, boastful representation of my righteousness
Yes.
is this podcast here with Keith.
The lowliest of
The
lows.
lowliest of lows. Here we are, folks. I'm bringing this sinner along. Look at me.
No, but I mean, think about it though. I think that I think it's easier. I think it's easier when you're. I think it's easier to look at my kids and to look at children today around who they sit with at the lunch table, right? And I'll tell you a quick story. We moved around a little bit growing up, and started in one town for elementary school, kind of moved a couple times, then moved back to that same town for my freshman year of high school. So I'm walking in to high school, and I haven't seen any of these kids since like third grade, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like that weird, and this is difficult for some people to imagine, but I'm sure a lot of people can. But it's that weird moment where you've got your food and you're looking, you pay, and then you're looking for anyone to be like, come sit with me, right?
Or a completely vacant table.
Yeah, or something, right? Just, and you're like, you're like, just somebody please be like, hey, right? And I remember this this couple girls that were like, hey, you're new, right? Like, why don't you come sit with us? And I was like, oh my God, thank God, right? Like, um, and I think about that, and I thought about that all through high school, and I always made sure that whatever grade past that, and I grew. They ended up not becoming in my friend circle or whatever, but I developed a friend circle and ate lunch with them. But I was very grateful for that opportunity, and it impacted me throughout the rest of my school career to make sure that there was always like, if somebody had that vacant,
Yeah,
lost look on their face, be like, come sit with us, right? And I made some good friends that way.
yeah, I think your point, the clarity I'm gaining from your analogy here is it's really ambiguous talking about, oh, willingness to associate with sinners in our life, right? But when you just boil it back to um, childhood instincts, right? Like
Mm.
there are situations where associating with somebody could increase or decrease, as the kids would say, your aura points, right? Increase or decrease your
standing.
your social credit,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're using that as a decision-making tool, I think you're living outside of the call Jesus has in your life.
Yeah. And I'm gonna
If you
take
think
that one step further and say, as an adult, if you get invited somewhere and you find out X person is coming and you're like, I don't wanna be there because X person's gonna be there, which I've done, you're also not living into the call, right? Because I think in that case, you're judging them as not worth your time and effort as well. What do you think? And it's not necessarily about
maybe
your
it's getting
standing
a little
or your cred.
granular, but
I'm just saying, I do it. I do it all the time.
yeah, I think more if it's associated with your perceived social value in your worldly society.
Yeah,
I think then yeah, don't make decisions that way.
Yeah, I would agree.
Don't use that as your decision maker. Oh, I'm waffling on, oh, hey, there's a new person. Oh, I should invite them. Oh, they got a hole in their shoe. Better pass. Right? Like, poor choice.
Hard pass.
Poor choice.
Yeah,
But
I think so. But I also think it goes a little step further too. It's complex, right? It's complex, and I agree with you. And I don't think I personally would do that, but I think that there's some relationships that we have with people that person, it's not an emotional problem, right? It's not a relationship problem like you've got some conflict with them and you just don't want to bring that up. Maybe they're just taxing to you, right? See what I'm saying? Like their personality and your personality, you're like, I can't handle X person today because of maybe their hyperness, maybe their laziness.
Is that why people aren't around when I'm around?
No, it's because you don't go to anything so you got to be like you and just don't go to anything, right? Like then it's like, well, it's not because I'm going, it's just because he doesn't go to anything. Anyway,
equal opportunity avoider.
No, but there's definitely some opportunity when I'm like, oh man, I just like I can't talk to that person today, right? Like it's just too much for me to handle. And it's not because of a conflict that we have, but it's more of just like I'm making, it's hard for me to associate with them at that point, right? You know what I mean? And so I think it does take it a little step further as an adult. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm probably not.
You're probably not. Never have been. Not since I've known you.
That is recorded, by the way, for prosperity's sakes. Yeah, so I think all this kind of looking at Rahab and looking at what we've talked about today. Um, now, let's flip the script
Okay.
for a second, and let's end this with flipping the script. I said in the beginning of this kind of part that there are some prideful people out there. There are some Christians out there who would look down upon people as maybe less spiritually advanced than they are.
Yeah.
Right? There absolutely are. And so I think that you need to, if you ever feel that sense, that tingle about it, self-righteousness bubble up, you need to guard yourself against that.
Yeah.
Because I think that's worse than doubting yourself, right? Having so much pride for yourself that you look down upon somebody as less advanced or less, more sinful than you are. That to me is probably one of the worst things that you can do as a Christian.
Yeah, because I think you've now become blind to your own nose blind to your own smell.
Yeah.
To use a Febreze analogy.
A euphemism.
Febreze analogy to end our story with. But do you want to end with something fun though?
What do you got?
Well, you had an icebreaker question for us, and I just skipped over it. But you're talking about spicy.
No,
you wanted to talk about hot takes and spicy foods.
Spicy food.
And you wanted to know how hot is too hot when it comes to spicy food.
Correct. I think personally, it's when you start getting acid reflux. It's too spicy. I enjoy a little heat. Don't get me wrong. But when you go to La Fuente, not a sponsor, should be, and their Jalasco sauce or what I can't pronounce it. Their hot sauce they put in it.
Oh yeah,
you gotta light on the hot sauce, because when they get that going, it's great. You get a little sweat going. You get a little mouth tingle. You're enjoying the food. But then the acid reflux hits.
Yeah, there's all sorts of digestive problems created by spicy food. You got to identify what the spicy food is and what the risk reward ratios, right?
Correct. Now you're a fan of really spicy food.
I like spicy food, but I'm very particular about it, right? Like, and if anybody's still listening, this is very much digestive issues, right? Like, it's not so much that my mouth is on. Like, a lot of my spicy food aversions aren't because, like, my base is on fire and it just hurts too bad.
Sure.
It's, I know I will have discomfort experiences much
Later.
worse than, but when I get into, like, my preferred spicy foods are, like, Thai foods or Indian curries or something like that, as opposed to, like, some of the Mexican hot foods like
ghost peppers and
like the habanero salsas and stuff like that may not on a hot scale be as hot as some of the other stuff, but like the adverse effects are terrible.
Yeah, that's
right?
why I said like that's what I get. I get the
yeah.
acid reflux is like when you start getting that, you're like, nah, I gotta.
Yeah, but
I
like,
enjoy the flavor of it.
Where
I just don't enjoy the acid reflux.
With like Indian food and stuff, like it actually starts like bubbling and sizzling and hissing like in my stomach. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, that was a level too far. That was a spice level too far. And I think sometimes at Thai restaurants and Indian restaurants that I've experienced, if there is a certain spice level you order above, there's a certain I think if I was a fly on the wall in the kitchen, right? There's certain. Oh, really?
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
He thinks he can handle that. All right, we'll find out.
Yeah, I'd like to deliver this to the table.
Well, that's it. That's the end of time.
Well, I'm glad we got to talk about some spicy food.
Join us next
brought
week.
in some La Fuente conversation.
Oh, I love me some
Now
La
I'm
Fuente.
getting hungry.
It's not that anyone's listening to this today, but it's Shop with a Cop at La Fuente.
Shop with a Cop?
Yeah, I think they're just getting donations for Shop for the Cop later. But you got to go to La Fuente for it. So
Okay.
maybe we'll do lunch there.
Not
Get
a
some
bad idea.
spicy food. All right. See everybody next week for the last example of sometimes it takes a woman to win it.
Do you got a tease for him?
Nope, no tease.
All right, sounds good.
All right, later.